This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Sefer Daniel, Part 7. We continue from where we left off. We finished with the dreams of Nevuchadnetzar and what he had really a prophecy that Bet HaMikdash, after it was destroyed, he was going to be a superpower, and he represented the gold head. And then there would be a kingdom that would take over the kingdom of Nevuchadnezzar, that represented by the silver. And a kingdom would come that would be lesser and would destroy the silver kingdom, and then there would be a fourth kingdom that will overpower, and finally the kingdom of the Jewish people, is represented from the outside by the stone, will come and destroy all four kingdoms that preceded it. That was the dream that Nevuchadnezzar received. First it was very inspiring. First he was very, wow, God, and he realized the value, and he praised God, and he seemed like he was going to be a big tzaddik. But the one thing about people that are not such tzaddikim is that they get inspired very quickly, and then it phases out. So after a few weeks, already Nevuchadnezzar, he forgot about it. He wasn't interested. He wasn't interested anymore. And he even thought, how am I going to make sure that the dream doesn't happen? Now he started thinking, how will I make it that I remain king forever? Me and my children. And nobody else will take the kingship from me. That's what he was thinking about. And he thought very, very hard. He said, let's see, what went ahead and destroyed the image in my dream? It was the boulder. It was Am Yisrael. I'll find a way to get rid. Uven, tafsik, takshivli, tafsik. I'll find a way to get rid of Am Yisrael and make sure that the dream never happens and never comes true. That was his plan. And he thought about it for a long time, and he figured, well, if there's one person that can make this dream not happen, it's me. Because I'm above mazal. I'm above all types of prophecies, all types of indication. I'm, after all, stronger than the God of the Jews, so I can cause it that I won't be affected by it. So after thinking about it, he decided to command the people that were very expert craftsmen, that used to know how to work with a lot of different metals. He said, I want you experts to make me an image made out of pure gold. Why did he want it to be made out of pure gold? What do you think the reason is? What do you say, Rachel? Exactly, because since he was in the dream gold, he was the gold head, he said, I'm going to make my own dream but come true. I'm going to make an image that's going to be 100% gold, nothing else. And it's going to be extremely tall. And that way I will win and I will defeat all of the Jewish people. Plus he was thinking to himself, I'm not just going to make an image out of gold. I'm going to make everyone bow down to the image. And then what's going to happen is the Jews were going to have a choice. Either the Jews bow down to the image or they don't. If they don't, I kill them. And then they'll die. I'll have a reason to kill them and I'll wipe them out. And if they bow down to the idol, their God will kill them. Either way, I win. Either way, I succeed in accomplishing the goal. That's what he was thinking about in how he was going to defeat Am Yisrael. Now, he was half right. If Am Yisrael bows down to idols, then that's the reason for God to destroy us. But he was also half wrong. He thought that he would be able to kill the Jews. And that's not the case. All of the enemies of the Jews always thought that they could kill us, and they could destroy us, and they could weaken us, and they never succeeded. So listen to what happens. He commands his people to build a statue 60 amot. You know how high 60 amot is? It's about as tall as a very, very high apartment building. You know, you have apartment buildings that go very high, like a big, big, big building. That's how tall it was. Very tall. It's taller than this building. 60 amot. It's like the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, it's a good one. It's like the Statue of Liberty. So big, 60 amot. The only difference was, when you build something so tall, you're usually supposed to make it very, very wide, so it holds itself. But he said, no, I want it only to be 6 amot wide, which means very little in its width, but very high. And anybody that knows anything about building, if you try to take, let's say you take a cube, a small little cube, a die that you roll, dice, and you say, I'll put one, and then I'll put another one, and another one, and another one. When you put one on top of one, it's pretty stable. You can move it around, and it's fine. It's not a big deal. When you put 3, it's a little bit more tricky to keep its balance. You put 4, 5, it starts tilting over even if you don't move. By the time you get to 7, it already falls down. If you could do 10, it's really, you have to keep everybody far away, and then you can't touch it. You certainly can't move it because it's going to fall. So Nevuchadnezzar said, no, I want you to build something high and very, very thin. Don't worry. It's going to stand up. Now they said to him, it can't stand up. He says, I'll figure it out. It's fine. He was thinking, because he has powers of tum'ah, he has impure powers, he can make that even a statue that otherwise wouldn't be able to stand is against science, that it could stand. He says, I'll make it stand. From the powers that he had of witchcraft, he was able to take it and make it on his own. That's what he said he was going to do. Now, why did he want it to be so tall? Why 60 amot? Where did he get that number? Because he knew that the Beit HaMikdash was 60 amot high. He said, the Beit HaMikdash is 60 amot high. I'm going to show them that not only did I destroy the Beit HaMikdash, I made my own idol worshipping. Just like Beit HaMikdash was a place of worship, it's a place where they would go ahead and they would pray, and Am Yisrael would offer sacrifices to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I made my own image that's going to go ahead and be just like the Beit HaMikdash. That's what he was thinking. Plus, the image that he saw in his dream, it was 60 amot high. So he says, I'm going to mimic that image. I'm going to make the same thing. I'm going to make everybody bow down to it. All the people of all the countries, of all the places I conquered, we're all going to bow down to it. Every single one of them. And then I'll see what the Jews do, and I'll get rid of the Jews. That's what he was thinking. So he decided, where should I go ahead and make a ceremony? The Navi says, it says in Daniel, he decided on a place named Bik'at Dura. Bik'at Dura was not only found during the time of Nevuchadnezzar. It was not the only time the Torah tells us about this valley. It was a valley. It was very deep. A valley usually has mountains surrounding it, and it's lower than all other places. So this valley of Dura, 300 years after the flood, where the whole entire world, including the animals and the plants, except for 7 people, all were wiped off the face of the earth. All of them were killed in a major, major flood, right? 300 years later, there was a new generation that emerged from Noach and his children and his grandchildren, and they decided to get together in this bik'ah, in this valley of Dura. And does anybody here know what they wanted to do in this valley? Anybody have any idea? I'll tell you. They wanted to build a tower, the Migdal Bavel. The Torah refers to it as Eretz Shinar, the land of Shinar, in the country of Bavel. And here in Sefer Daniel it says, Bik'at Dura b'Medinat Bavel. It was in the same exact place. This Dura place was the same location. Why did they choose in such an early time to do their tower, to build their tower in this place specifically out of all the places? Few reasons. First of all, the Satan was very powerful in that location. How come? Because it says that when the flood happened, all of the people that died, all of their bones, all of the impurity drained out. You know, like sometimes you have it rain, it pours, and it always goes. Does it go water? Does it climb up the mountain? No, it always goes to the lowest point. And it goes to the drains, and then it drains out through the drains. Right? If you take a shower and you have a drain, if it's sealed, nothing comes out. The minute you open it, everything goes to that. It doesn't stay anywhere else in the shower. Everything goes through that drain. Bik'at Dura was the low point where the whole flood essentially all the waters, with all the bones, with all the people, drained through Bik'at Dua because it was such a low point. Which means the bones of all the deceased were located there. And together with all the impurity, all the evil people that were there, they were all found in that Bik'ah. So therefore it was a powerful source of Tum'ah, of impurity. The impurity there was super, super, super strong. And therefore Satan, which is the evil angel, he was also very powerful in that Bik'ah. Not only that, it says that the people of the Migdal Bavel, they wanted to do what? They wanted to wage a war against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But who could fight against HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Can you take a sword and battle HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's not what their war was going to be. They wanted to bring into this world so much impurity. They wanted to make like a portal of impurity where it would be so contaminated, that the world would be so perverted that you could never remove it. And that's why the Torah emphasizes that they knew the language of Lashon HaKodesh. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Hen am echad v'safa achat lechulam. They have one tongue. They speak one language. Which language? The Torah language. Why was that important? Because through the Torah's language, through the verbiage of different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the empowerment of certain angels, they could tap in to all of the foundations of the world. Like a computer, for example. If a person knows the technology behind the computer, he could break into any computer and make it do whatever he wants it to do. If he wants it to stop working, if he wants it to start looking at somebody else and paying attention and spying, if he knows how to break into the computer, he's able to control it. So they had the codes to break in to the world. Meaning, they knew how to bring destruction, self-destruction on the entire world by using powers that were very mystical, very magical powers. All of that, it can't be done in other tongues. You have to know Lashon HaKodesh. The language that the world was created with was the language of Ivrit, of the holy language of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the language that they spoke up until the time of the Migdal Bavel. So what does God do? In order to foil the plan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu changed their ability to speak. He made them speak all in different languages, except for one language, except for the language of Lashon HaKodesh. Why? Because that language is too powerful. He took away the ability to speak that language. And therefore, they weren't able to carry their plan, aside from the fact that he confused... Shh. Quiet. Aside from the fact that he confused them, he also went ahead and he caused it that the language that was spoken was no longer Lashon HaKodesh. So the power, the immense power that was contained in that valley was super powerful. Later on in history, it says, which is actually connected to this week's parasha and next week's parasha, there was a group of Jews. They were known as Bnei Ephraim. The children of the tribe of Ephraim decided that the time of the redemption has arrived 30 years before Moshe Rabbeinu's redemption. Before the Jews actually left Mitzrayim, 30 years beforehand, they went and they decided, we're leaving. Now, to leave Egypt, forget in those times, already from Yosef's times, from the time that Yosef was sold to Egypt, no slave ever escaped from Egypt. This is why the brothers specifically wanted to sell him to Mitzrayim. En route to Egypt, they said, if he is sold to the Egyptians as a slave, he's never getting out of there. And why was that? Why was Egypt so special and so different that you couldn't go ahead and run away? Because the Egyptians had magic. They had black magic, and they were able to entrap the city using the power of the angels. And uttering different names of angels, they were able to entrap the city that no one could escape. And that was what was so special about Am Yisrael, because we had HaKadosh Baruch Hu on our side. Even the angels froze, and Am Yisrael was allowed to leave. So nothing was able to get in the way. You know who else had that power? Bnei Ephraim. They knew the different names of the angels that they can invoke. Like we learned on Thursday night from the Arizal, that anybody that knows the names of angels and says the name of the angel, together with a shvu'ah, with an oath, that is coupled with the name of God, he has the power to use that angel. The angel becomes subject to whatever he wants it to do. So the Bnei Ephraim knew this secret, and they said, we could escape. We can get out of Egypt through these powers. So they did. They managed to get out. The Egyptians were powerless to stop them. They did not have the ability to contain what was going on, and Bnei Ephraim ran away. So on the one hand, you could say, wow, they really succeeded. But what happened next was the angels were protecting them along the journey. They arrived in this bik'ah. They arrived, according to Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, they arrived in Bik'at Dura. And at this place, the power that they were dependent on, which were the angels, were no longer able to protect them. And it says that there was a war that raged on at that place, Bik'at Dura, and every single one of Bnei Ephraim ended up being killed in that valley. So not only do we have all those people that died in the generation of the Hafelaga, the generation of the Tower of Babel, but you also have the sin of the Bnei Ephraim, who were also killed in that exact valley. So you see, the impurity that exists in that valley was extremely powerful. The impact of even the angels couldn't really protect Bnei Ephraim for what was going on over there, and they all ended up dying. So Nevuchadnezzar, knowing all of this, he was so smart. He knew all of this. He knew exactly what the power of this place was, and he himself had the ability to go ahead and harness the power of the negative, the bad angels. He chose this valley specifically to go ahead and to bring the destruction and the idol worship on Am Yisrael. And in a sort of sense, he was hinting to Am Yisrael, hey, if you don't bow down to my idol, I'm going to do to you what I did to the Bnei Ephraim. Not what he did, but what happened to the Bnei Ephraim will happen to you next. It was a sort of like a hint of what's going on and what's going to take place. The Midrash actually says that a few years earlier, Nevuchadnezzar got very angry at a group of Jews. Why did he get angry at them? Because they were very handsome. And the women of Babel were not as attracted to their men of the Bavlim like they were of the Jewish men. So it bothered them that all these women were married to their husbands who weren't as attractive. And the Jews were very, very attractive. So Nevuchadnezzar saw this beauty of the Jews were surpassing the beauty of Babel. It made him angry. He decided he's going to kill all those beautiful Jews. So all of the handsome young men of Am Yisrael were taken to this valley and they were executed in mass, in large numbers. So cruel was this man Nevuchadnezzar that he didn't care, that they didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to be killed. But he said, no, because they made us not happy, so they deserve to be killed. In his mind, it didn't matter. It was all about him. He was the only thing that mattered. So he said, I'm going to do it in this location. If anybody rebels against me, they're going to have the same fate as these other Jews that I killed a few years earlier. This was Nevuchadnezzar, and that was his plan of what he was going to do in this valley Bik'at Dura. As we already said, Nevuchadnezzar originally told them to build the statue without a base, without a platform. And the bottom line was, it wasn't able to hold up. Nevuchadnezzar thought he was going to be able to sustain it with powers of impurity. He realized it wasn't going to stand, because every time they would build it, it would collapse, it would fall. Whenever they transferred it, it would always fall. And they said to Nevuchadnezzar, we can't do this. He said, okay, I figured out that even when things are impure, without a source of purity, it's not going to work. If you want the impurity to work, it needs to latch onto a source of purity. How is he going to do that? He says, bring me gold from Yerushalayim. Bring me gold from the treasury of Bet HaMikdash, and let's build a base of gold, and then on that, we're going to put the Tumah. Now, you can imagine the Jewish people. They're thinking to themselves, this is our gold. This is our money that we paid from our hard work in order to go for the purposes of holy things like the Bet HaMikdash. And here is Nevuchadnezzar taking all that gold and using it for the exact opposite, for idol worship, mamash, 100% idol worship. And Am Yisrael was saying to themselves that, why does God give us all of this gold? Why does God give us money? in order to use it for positive things, for mitzvot, for positive commands. And we didn't do that. When they lived in Israel, when they lived in Eretz Yisrael, they didn't go ahead and use the money for mitzvot. Even though some of the money was in Beit HaMikdash, but most of what they did was improper. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu therefore responded and said, I can't allow you to have this money. And since you're not worthy of all of this gift that I gave you, it's going to go to Nevuchadnetzar. And this was very humiliating. For Am Yisrael, it was very tough to see their hard work go to the exact opposite of what they believed. And finally they realized, we did something really bad. We used to sin, we used to do terrible things. And at this moment, a lot of the Jews started turning around and saying, what have we done? We have to come back to the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they finally began to understand the severity of the sin that happened. So he took the gold. We said he didn't use anything but gold. It was 100% pure gold that was from Beit HaMikdash for the base, and the rest came from the treasury of Nevuchadnetzar, which was Tameh. There was one more thing he took. He commanded that the people that were given this mission take tzitz. The tzitz was the plate, the tablet, that was inscribed on it, Shem Hashem, the name of God, and it was worn on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Only the Kohen Gadol. There was only one tzitz, and it was only allowed to be worn by the Kohen Gadol. And he commanded that this should be taken and brought to the statue. What do you want to do with it? The statue had a face. It was an image. On the top there was a face. He took the tzitz and he put it in the mouth of the statue. The minute he inserted it into the mouth of the statue, it started speaking, I am your God, I am your God. He kept repeating on its own. It came to life. The image itself started coming to life and talking as if it was really Avodah Zarah. So he took the purity of something so holy and he was able to harness, like we said, the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be used for good, and it could also be used by the wrong people for bad. And Nevuchadnezzar used the tzitz of the Kohen Gadol in order to make this statue begin to talk. And it started to talk. He sends out a message to all of the territories of Bavel. Every nation, every culture, every society must bring representatives to this ceremony, to this party. There's a disagreement in the Gemara. Some say that he commanded that each nation bring 23 representatives. And some disagree and say, no, only 3 representatives from each nation were required. And maybe if you wanted to do 23, you could bring. The Jewish people were no exception to the rule. The 3 people that were selected were 3 of the greatest dignitaries, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are chosen to be the ones to represent Am Yisrael, and they're faced with a major, major dilemma. On the one hand, what's going to be if they don't bow down? Nevuchadnezzar is going to be really angry. He's going to be upset. He might kill them. He might kill other Jews. He might wage war and say, I'm going to kill every Jew. They're afraid. On the other hand, if they bow down, they have to be afraid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bow down to idols, fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were in a dilemma. They didn't know what to do. So first they said, maybe it's not idols. Maybe Nevuchadnezzar simply just wants that we respect him. And he made this image to represent him, not as a god, but out of respect, he wants us to bow down. Like you bow down to a person out of respect, you say, Shalom, Shalom. Now, you're not saying that he's God. You're saying that hi, how you doing? I'm respecting the person. So maybe that's what he means. So how are we going to find out? How do we find out if he really means, because it wasn't clear. He didn't make it clear. He didn't tell people, Avodah Zarah, or just an image, a statue of himself. They said, you know what? Let's ask Daniel. Let's see. If we ask Daniel, he'll tell us. Is it an image of Avodah Zarah we can't bow down to? Or is it something that it's just a mere respect and we could bow down to? They asked Daniel. Do you know, Daniel, why Nevuchadnezzar is making this? What was his motivation? What was his reason? Then he says, I don't know. It wasn't told to me. I can't find it out. I don't know. So they realize they have a real question. They really don't know what to do. Daniel says, you know what I recommend? If you don't know and I don't know, let's ask a prophet. At the time in Bavel, there was Yehezkel. Yehezkel was the prophet of Bavel. And he would prophesy to the Jews many things. Most of them were very, very positive. He wanted, God sent messages. Usually prophecy doesn't exist outside of Eretz Yisrael. In a usual circumstance, a person that lives out of Israel does not receive prophecy. Which is why, for example, Yonah, he ran away from Israel. Why did he run away? He says, if I'm outside of Israel, I won't receive a prophecy. So Yehezkel was the exception. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to show the Jews of Bavel, I'm with you. I'm with you. And even though I usually don't come in prophecy, I came in prophecy. And he would constantly tell Yehezkel, encourage the Jews. Tell them to be strong. Tell them they're going to return to Eretz Yisrael. Tell them that they're a holy nation and to keep the Torah and the mitzvot. Yehezkel had a very positive attitude, especially compared to the previous prophecies of Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, which were all negative. If you sin, you're going to lose Beit HaMikdash, you're going to be destroyed, you're going to be killed. All of that already took place. All of that already happened. So now it comes to Yehezkel, he tries to encourage the Jewish people, to uplift their spirits. They're so broken, they're so depressed. He lifted them. Daniel says, go to Yehezkel, see what he says. They come before Yehezkel, and they say, Yehezkel, we need your help. We want to know, the image Nevuchadnezzar made, is it representing him or is it representing idols? Which one is it? We have to know. Yehezkel says, I don't have that information, but from what I received from Yeshaya, it doesn't matter. Yeshaya taught me, whenever such a situation is to arise, what you should do in such situations is you should run away. Evade it. Don't go to the party and don't be required to bow down. And if Nevuchadnezzar is to ask, or if any of his people are to ask, why weren't you on the party? Come up with some excuse. You say, I was busy with government affairs, I was doing other things. Avoid coming to the party, and that way you don't have to put yourself in the situation of danger, and you don't have to, Rahmana litzlan, give up your life, and any of that. That's what he told them to do. Before he even spoke to God, he just said, this is what I received from Yeshaya. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah take a moment, they stop, they think, and they say, no, we disagree with you. We don't agree with this system. Why did they disagree? Why did they say that? He's telling him a good idea. He's telling him, you know what, just don't go to the party. It won't be a problem. You won't have to bow down. He's saving them. They said, we disagree. Because what's going to be, if we don't show up, Nebuchadnezzar said the representatives of all the nations have to come. And they all have to bow down. There's going to be a nation that's going to look around, see everybody is bowing down, not realize that the Jews are not there, and think the Jewish people also bow down. Because there wasn't anybody that didn't bow down. We prefer to be in the crowd and not bow down, so they'll know that the Jewish people didn't bow down. He says, but that's risking your life. You're for sure going to be killed. We're willing to risk our lives. Where did Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah get the courage to risk their lives? To go put themselves in such a situation, to risk their lives in order to not bow down to an image when they had the ability to escape. Yehezkel is telling them, run away. Just make an excuse for a few days. Just go. And they say, no, we don't agree with that. Where did they get that? It says they learned it from no less than the frogs of Egypt. He said the frogs of Egypt, what did they do? They came out of the Nile and they started jumping into the ovens. They jumped into the food. They went ahead and sacrificed themselves in order to carry out the will of God. They said, is a frog commanded in keeping Torah, in mitzvot? Was the frog in Har Sinai accepting the yoke of heaven and 613 mitzvot. No, he's not commanded. And still, for the honor of God, they were willing to sacrifice. And we, human beings, the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, are not willing to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of God. We are. We accept upon ourselves. Yehezkel hears this, he says, wait. Let me find out then. If you're really convinced, let me find out from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's see what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. He turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in prayer. Yehezkel finally receives a prophecy, and he sees that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in front of him. He speaks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya want to risk their lives. They want to go to the party and not bow down. Will they be saved? Will you save them? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, I won't save them. The Jewish people sinned. On account of their sin, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and I should save them. I won't do it. Yehezkel hears these hard words, difficult words. He knows that's the end. Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya, they're going to do what they just said. They're going to sacrifice their lives. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to save them. We're going to lose 3 tzaddikim. He yells out. He cries out. A sigh, a terrible a mourning that befell upon Yehezkel. He also realized, by the way, that it was an idol. He realized through derivation, through understanding from God's answer, he realized that this really was an idol. Because if it wasn't an idol, God would have said, they're allowed to bow down. They're allowed to run away. But God didn't say that. He said, I'm not going to save them. Which means, they're right. It is avodah zarah. It is an image that you cannot bow down to. He understood from the answer of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was the case, and that He's not going to save them. He says to Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya, he has to say the truth. He tells them, look, I gave you the advice to run away. You disagree. You say, no, we don't want to do that. We want to sacrifice ourselves. If you take that path, God said He's not going to save you. Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya said, okay, we're still going to do it. Still going to do it. It's powerful. Yehezkel, as they turn around to leave, receives a prophecy. Kadosh Baruch Hu comes to him and says, you think I'm not going to save these 3 great tzaddikim? Of course I'm going to save them. But I don't want them to know that. I want them to do it with a purity of heart. That they're not doing it because they'll be saved. But rather, they will do it because it's the right thing to do. But of course I'm going to save them. Yehezkel receives this prophecy, they don't know about it. Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya already left. Now, that night was the night of Pesach. Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya are in their homes. They know tomorrow is the ceremony. Tomorrow is when everything is on the line. And they started second-guessing themselves. But not because they didn't have courage. They had the courage. But they said, maybe we should really take the advice of Yehezkel. Maybe Yehezkel is correct. Why? He says, if we go and we sacrifice our lives, is that going to bring more honor to God or less honor? What are the Babylonians, the Bavlim, what are they going to say? They're going to say, look, the Jewish God has no ability to save Hananiah, Mishael, Vazaya. They ended up dying. And that's going to be Hilul Hashem. Remember, we spoke a few weeks ago that tzaddikim, all they cared about, they didn't care about themselves. They cared about, is this going to bring honor to God or is it going to desecrate God? And they started questioning, maybe we're not doing the right thing. Maybe we should run away. So they started praying and they started turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in prayer and asking God, please, please, please make sure that we don't die. Make sure that we get saved, not for ourselves, but for your honor. And as they were praying, and they didn't ask for a miracle, they weren't praying for a miracle, they were praying some normal, maybe Nevuchadnetzar will say, you know what, I let you go. Okay, fine, you don't want to. Maybe something will change the normal circumstance and they won't have to go through Hilul Hashem. And at that point, they started praying, and on Pesach, one of the things we say is Hallel. Hananiah said, Lo lanu Adonai, lo lanu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not for our own sake. Ki leshimcha ten kavod. Give honor for your sake, says Mishael. And Azariah, he goes ahead and finishes, Al hasticha ve'al amitecha, your kindness, your truth. And together, all three of them said, Ve'emet Adonai le'olam hallelujah. Every single one of them prayed a different prayer, and it flowed from their lips. And the Gemara says that any time a person prays a prayer and it flows from his lips, it means it's going to happen. Like the Gemara tells us about Rabbi Leeor, he would give people blessings. And one time he gave a blessing, he knew that the blessing would come true. The other time he gave a blessing and he saw this person was in danger. How did he know? It says because when he gave the first person the blessing, it flowed. It went very smooth. He didn't stumble. It just went smoothly. The other person, he had to think, he stopped, he had to correct himself, he had to go back, wait a second, okay. He finished the blessing almost like very cut off, very paused. He realized there's something wrong. And then sure enough, this person in the first blessing, it succeeded. The second person, very shortly afterwards, passed away. Because he understood what flows from the lips is a sign from God that it's going to work. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah started praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they realized the tefillah was flowing from them. The energy, the strength, and it gave them courage. And they said, yes, this is the right thing for us to do. We will turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we will try our best to make a Kiddush Hashem as much as we possibly can. The day of the party comes, the morning of Pesach. They're dressed in beautiful clothing in honor of the holiday of Pesach. They're wearing tzitzit. They're wearing Jewish beautiful garments. In short, they stand out. Everybody knows these are Jews. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah make a decision. They said, you know what? Everybody's going to be bowing down soon. And we don't want to appear very noticeable, even more than we already are. Each one of us will stand in a different place. We're not going to stand together. Each one will be in a different location. And that way it'll be more spread out. Maybe there could be some sort of protection if we're more spread out. In the meantime, everybody's able to see that they're Jewish. They didn't want to hide that they're Jewish. They didn't want to. They wanted people to know that they're Jewish. Because they wanted the name and the sanctity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be created in the world. So they were ready and willing. Sometimes you have people, they go outside on the street and I'll just hide the kippah because I don't want people to know. No, opposite. You wear your kippah because you're Jewish. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah knew that they were in a dangerous situation. But they still went ahead and wore what the Jews wear because they wanted to stand together. And all of a sudden, the ceremony begins. Nevuchadnetzar has one of these people with loud voices, a very loud voice and like a crying sound to it. Everyone, when you start hearing the drums and the flutes and the harps and the orchestra playing, you must bow down. Whoever does not bow down will be executed by word of Nevuchadnezzar. And the image is brought out, and they start carrying it out, and they see that the music is about to begin playing. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see next week what ends up happening with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Do they bow down? Do they not bow down?
They don't.
What does everybody else do? And what happens with Nevuchadnezzar? Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see next week. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.